Hello, everyone. This video is about organizational structure. And when we talk about organizational structure, what do we actually mean when we say structure? Per Don Shapiro, who is the president of First Concepts Consultants, structure is actually much more than what we normally think of when we look at that organizational chart to see who's the CEO, who's the senior vice president, who's the division manager. Per Don Shapiro, structure is actually, pardon me, it's the people, the new hires, the positions, the roles, the responsibilities that they have, the culture, the procedures, the technology. Structure is as well capital, physical facilities, locations, geography, software, logistics, purchasing, distribution, the physical act of a customer buying or acquiring, taking possession of a good. All of these are rolled up into structure. So we see that structure has a much greater understanding, or is a much larger concept than just those organizational charts. And so when we think about structure, what do we need to do? We need to understand the design of all of those pieces. We need to select structures, systems, and management styles that best allow us to implement that strategy of matching internal resources and capabilities to our business opportunities. So we want to understand what are those basic principles that determine our optimum structure, the whole, that based upon our particular business requirements and our products and our services that will provide that optimum structure for us. So we are to consider how these management systems influence our strategy. Peter Drucker said that culture eats strategy for lunch. In this case, let's replace the word culture with the word structure, and we will see that structure does eat strategy for lunch. So structure being the greater of the two. So when we speak about organizational design, we should do what? We should group our employees within an organization based on the tasks that they perform, based upon their products, based upon the geography, based upon that process and that need for those employees to interact. So action is the key word here. We must have our action, but it must be organized action. It must be structured action. So strategy without action is virtually useless. However, that action must lend itself, must support our structure. So when we speak about our organization, we basically have two organizational challenges. Those challenges are challenges of coordination and challenges of cooperation. So cooperation is aligning interests of individuals with different goals, where coordination is harmonizing those different activities to achieve desired goals. So when we think of our coordination, we understand that, again, we need to group the individuals together that are going to be working the closest with each other, that have the most intense coordination, harmonizing those different activities to achieve those goals. And so geographic dispersed goals should be based on or grouped by geographic unit. Product ranges should be grouped based upon functional tasks, and then diversified firms should be grouped or based on product divisions. So when we look at our organizational structures, we see that we have three main organizational types. So we've got a functional structure, a multi-divisional structure, and a matrix structure. When we look at our functional structure, we see that that functional structure has its strengths. What are some examples of companies that have functional structure? What is a functional structure? It's a single category firm. It's a single business firm. So what are some examples there? So Crocs. So those foam clogs that for shoes, Michelin tires, Roku. So the electronic box that's linked to your TV and your internet connection, Spanx, for example. Anything that is a single business firm, and that single business firm has its strengths. It's great for that centralized decision-making coming down from the top. It allows those tasks to be grouped together, and it allows us to exploit scale economies, capability building, standardized control systems. But it also has its weaknesses. So when we think, what are the weaknesses of a functional structure? It can be ineffective integration and coordination as the product is expanding, as we're getting larger and larger, as we're having more and more products, as we're having greater or more geographies, more customer demographics that we are supporting. So it's the problem of a small firm growing to a medium-sized firm. So one of the issues with that small firm growing to a medium-sized firm, frankly, is a company that I used to work for. They got very top-heavy. It turned out that the culture changed. Don't forget, Drucker said that culture eats strategy for lunch. Our culture changed. They hired a lot of middle managers there right here. And so what did that do is it was a small, it was not a mom and pop organization, but it was a small organization of people who had worked very closely together. People knew each other personally, outside of work as well, did things together. And so that changed the culture. And the company actually lost part of its identity, its reason for being there, that cohesion. Customers were not happy because there was a disconnect with what the company was supposed to do, supposed to be. There was a decline in service level, and it's the type of issue there. I did work with another firm for a short time, friends of mine, that had these same issues, going from a boutique consulting firm to work with a specific group of clients, and then wanting that boutique firm to be expanded so that they could have more and more clients. Next is a multi-divisional structure. And so here is a graphic of a multi-divisional structure. You can see we've got division for our product X, division for product Y, division product Z. And each of those has what? R&D, so research and development. Each has marketing, each has finance. And when we think of those divisions, what are some examples? So Walt Disney having media networks, having parks and resorts, having studio entertainment, having consumer products. We think of Virgin Group. So Richard Branson having Virgin Rail, Virgin Mobile, Virgin Records. We think of DuPont having electronics and industrial, having mobility and materials, having water and protection. So a multi-divisional structure does have its strengths. What are some of those strengths? It's good for an organization that is product-based, again, our product-based, and allows those separate divisions. It allows a decentralized decision making. So before, with the centralized, the decisions came from up top. Now we are decentralizing our decisions. And so the business strategies and the operating decisions are made at the division level, whereas the top level make the corporate overall arching strategy decisions. And so what is another great strength is that it does foster that development of what top leadership here that may be able to replace from a succession standpoint, because you must always have a succession plan. So here it is, we're developing that top management leadership. What are some weaknesses though for a multi-divisional structure? One weakness is that there is the possibility, not necessarily, but the possibility, it is a temptation to focus more on current financial positions of a particular division than to focus on developing capabilities and resources across the company as a whole. There is, as we see here from R&D, that duplication of divisional efforts. There can be a loss of economies of scope. So we think, how do we mitigate these weaknesses? We can include other metrics as our measurements for success. What are some of those metrics? It could be market share. It could be new products. It could be number of new customers. It could be the length of an existing customer association. It could be the concentration of the market. What else could we do to mitigate that? We can have better communication between division heads and managers to understand what each division is working on, and to be creative in our collaborative products and services across that division. There can be frequent meetings between the top level managers. So we have to have some type of incentive to encourage the division chiefs to also work for the company as a whole, and not to have all of the incentives based upon their individual division. Next, we have a matrix structure. So when we think of matrix, what are some of the companies that we may think of? Philips, for example, or Caterpillar, or Starbucks. And so you think of Starbucks for the water. We think of, well, I beg your pardon, we think of a functional hierarchy there. We think of HR, finance, and marketing, but we also think of a geographic division. So is it the Americas? Is it Asia Pacific? Is it Europe? Is it Middle East and Africa? We think of a product-based division. So is it coffee? Is it baked good? Is it merchandising? So we think of the teams that are there that are producing. And so what are some of the strengths? So here's an example of our matrix structure. So you see we have a president, we have R&D, we have manufacturing, marketing, HR, finance, and procurement. But we also have our managers of our different products, X and Y. And so the manager of the product X is working with R&D, is working with manufacturing, is working with marketing. Product Y manager as well is working with R&D, as well with manufacturing, as well with marketing, and also manager Z. So we have these interlocking, interlacing of interactions between the different areas, again, research and development, marketing, manufacturing, HR, finance, and procurement, as well as our managers. And so what are the strengths of a matrix structure? Multiple products, multiple functions, multiple locations. So now we're able to pull each of these in together and to create our interlocking, interlacing interactions. It's good for flexible sharing of employees across products. So employees from product X may go to work with the the product Y or product Z, or as well be able to look at the marketing here. So marketing for product X going now to look at marketing for product Y or product Z. It does, it allows that coordination to meet demands of what a possible unstable environment. And as well, it permits functional and product skill development because someone is able to go from one product to the next or from one area to the next. What are some of the weaknesses there? We have a larger head office staff, almost always. You have almost always a much slower decision-making process. The employees are not sure. There can be conflict and confusion among who is actually, pardon me, who is actually giving the direction and what happens when those directions do not mesh well together. So there can be overlapping responsibilities. And so how do we mitigate these weaknesses? There can be standardization of manager forms, of metrics. There can be regular staffing meetings discussing the new pipeline and the timing of new projects. So you coordinate better with those, and you have your staffing procedures to coordinate better. There can be better training of project managers to have a consistency of approach. So employees understand exactly what is expected of them and when. As well, there can be specific module training as far as software or anything else that you're working with, the specific tasks, so specific training of employees so that they understand the differences and that it will as well reduce stress. And then finally, there is what we're calling alternate organizational forms. And so these alternate organizational forms are becoming more common. What can we think of there? So adhocracy or a team-based or project-based approach or network. So adhocracy being a flexible coordination and collaboration to solve problems. The team-based, project-based, I work on a lot of projects. They are more flexible, they're more adaptable for what engagements of short duration. An example that we had in the company that I work in, we had, there was a big push. The laws changed for leases, operational leases, and how our operational leases recorded on balance sheets. And so that law changed. And there was a huge push there. There were a lot of issues. And so what did our company do is that it took various managers and various top performing workers, put them together in a group for 2 months because there was a time crunch of when these companies were required to be able to display or report these different leases on their balance sheets. And so we called it the lease swarm. And so it was a group, it was basically a war room that was a short duration. It was a 2-month deal. And again, it took managers and top workers from various disciplines within the company so that they could do that. When we look at networks of small, closely related independent firms, we think of the movie industry. And so all of those firms working together as complements of each other. I remember I moved to LA I was only there for a short time, less than a year, but when I was looking for places to live, every time someone asked me, oh, are you with the industry? Are you with the industry? Are you with the industry? Because there is such a prevalence there of different networks of small, closely related interdependent firms. And so how can we use those alternate organizational forms? We focus on coordination. We do not focus on control for one group trying to control another group. That focus is on how do those groups work together. So there is a reliance on coordination by mutual adjustment. And we work with individuals in multiple organizational roles. So that alternate organizational form, again, being short, being sweet, being that come together to solve a specific problem that is very time sensitive. So that is another good way to take advantage of that structure.